What's up, y'all? IWontWin checking in, and today I want to look into the career of one of the greatest NFL kick returners no one talks about. NFL Untold Stories, Leon Washington. Leon Washington was born August 29th, 1982 in Jacksonville, Florida. Washington spent most of his childhood growing up in the Oakland Terrace apartments. Him and the other kids in the neighborhood would play all different types of games, including football, whenever they had the free time. And in 1992, police officer John Mike, who was the head coach of a Pop Warner football team called the Arlington Warriors, was looking to fill out some roster spots on his team. Everybody at Oakland Terrace Apartments kept telling Officer Mike about this kid named Leon who had great speed. Officer Mike went into the neighborhood and conducted foot races to see who was the fastest, and sure enough, it was Leon Washington. Officer Mike invited Washington to practice, and after a few weeks of getting used to the contact of football, it wasn't hard to tell that he would be a star. Over the next few years of playing Pop Warner football, Washington would excel at the running back position. Despite Washington's youth football stardom, his focus was basketball as a 9th grader at University Christian, a private school in Jacksonville. But after a fallout with his basketball coach, Washington decided to transfer to Andrew Jackson High School. As a 10th grader, Washington would not play football due to helping his grandmother around the house, who he lived with as a teen and who he credits where he gets his discipline from. While attending Jackson High, word got around to head football coach Kevin Sullivan of how great Washington was in his Pop Warner days. So to butter Washington up to join the football team, Coach Sullivan would call Washington PWL, which stood for Pop Warner Legend, whenever he saw him around the school. Washington would finally give in and join the football team his junior year. On his first touch of his junior season, Washington lined up at punter to punt the ball away on 4th down, and when the ball was snapped, it went over his head. The ball lands on the 1-yard line, he picks it up and then takes it 99 yards for a touchdown. After that play, his coaches knew he was the real deal. Washington would play running back and wide receiver on offense and cornerback on defense, and he was also known as a dangerous punt and kick returner. His senior year, Washington recorded 2,437 rushing yards, 28 rushing touchdowns, 3 punt return touchdowns, 1 kick return touchdown, 88 combined tackles, and 3 interceptions. He was also named Mr.Football in the state of Florida, an award given to the top high school football player in the state. Rivals 100 ranked Washington as the number 1 rated cornerback and the number 9 rated overall player coming out of high school. That 2002 high school class would include Vince Young, Haloti Ngata, Lorenzo Booker, Marcus Vick, Ahmad Brooks, Devin Hester, and Maurice Claret. Washington had offers from South Carolina, Oklahoma, Maryland, Florida, and Florida State. And keep in mind that Washington's entire family were Florida Gator fans. But during the recruiting process, he didn't feel like Florida made him a priority. And ultimately, he would commit to Florida State and become a Seminole to play for head coach Bobby Bowden. It was tough on Washington's family at first, but they would eventually switch over and become Florida State fans. Entering Florida State in 2002 as a freshman, Washington would make the permanent switch to running back. As a true freshman, he would see limited carries, as the offense mainly featured junior running back Greg Jones and senior wide receiver Anquan Bolden. That season, Washington rushed for 273 yards on 60 carries and 1 touchdown in 14 games, including a single game 100-yard rushing performance. Even though he would see limited carries at running back, Washington would take over as the lead return man. As a punt returner, he had 34 returns for 392 yards, and at kick returner, he had 13 returns for 368 yards and 1 touchdown. He would also record 11 combined tackles, 2 forced fumbles, and 1 fumble recovery for a touchdown on special teams coverage. As a sophomore, Washington would see his role expand in Florida State's offense, but unfortunately the injury bug would hit him as he suffered a dislocated shoulder in the season opener against UNC and would miss 4 games. But Washington would bounce back. His best game on the ground came in a double overtime victory against NC State, where Washington rushed for 121 yards on 17 carries and had the game-winning touchdown run in the second overtime period. That win against NC State would lead to Florida State clinching the ACC. Washington had 74 rushes for 387 yards, averaging 5.2 yards per carry and rushing for 1 touchdown that season. And at punt returner, he recorded 16 returns for 189 yards and 1 touchdown. As a junior, Washington would have a breakout year, as he and fellow recruiting classmate running back Lorenzo Booker would be the focal points of the Florida State offense. He averaged 6.9 yards per rush attempt, which led the ACC that season. Washington rushed for 951 yards, 7 touchdowns, and had a total of 1,041 yards from scrimmage. His best game came in the Gator Bowl against West Virginia, where he rushed for 195 yards on 12 carries and had 1 touchdown. Washington was named Gator Bowl Most Valuable Player. As a senior, Washington's production would fall due to a reduced role behind Lorenzo Booker, causing his NFL draft stock to slip. After the season was over, he entered the 2006 NFL Draft and was selected in the 4th round by the New York Jets. Washington was excited to be an NFL player, but also for a chance to be mentored by Jets Hall of Fame running back Curtis Martin, who would miss the entire season due to injury. Washington quickly made an impact as a rookie, starting 8 games and leading the team in rushing with 650 yards and scoring 4 touchdowns on the ground. He would prove to be a threat as a receiver out the backfield as well, catching 25 passes for 270 yards. The Jets finished 10-6 that season, but would lose in the wildcard round against the New England Patriots in the playoffs. In 2007, the Jets acquired running back Thomas Jones from the Chicago Bears. They would create a 1-2 punch where Jones was the lead back and Washington was the secondary back. The team finished 4-12 that season, but despite a down year for the team, Washington would shine as a return man, taking 3 kick returns back for TDs, which was tied for the most in that season. In his 3rd year, Washington would have a breakout season as he became one of the best all-around weapons in the league. He recorded 448 rushing yards and 6 rushing touchdowns, had 335 receiving yards and 2 receiving touchdowns, and as a return man, he had 1 kick return for a touchdown. That season, Washington led the league with 2,332 all-purpose yards. Washington's play that year led him to be named first-team All-Pro, as well as being selected to play in the Pro Bowl as a kick returner. But after coming off his best season as a pro, Washington would face adversity in 2009. In the first quarter of Week 7 against the Oakland Raiders, Washington would suffer a broken right fibula after being tackled on a rush attempt. He would miss the rest of the season, and many people believed that his career was in jeopardy and doubted that Washington would return to the league. And during the 2010 offseason, Washington was traded to the Seattle Seahawks, where he was mainly used as a return specialist. After months of rehab, Washington was set to prove his doubters wrong, and he would do just that. On Washington's 57 kick returns, he had a total of 1,461 yards and 3 touchdowns, which again was tied for the most in the league. Talk about a bounce back year. Washington would spend 2 more years in Seattle and would be released after his 2nd Pro Bowl selection in 2012. In 2013, he was signed with the New England Patriots, but would be released after 2 games and was signed with the Tennessee Titans for the remaining of the year. Washington would play his last season of football with the Titans in 2014 before retiring. He retired with 8 kick return touchdowns in his career, which is tied for the most in NFL history with Josh Cribbs and Cordero Patterson. He also holds the record for most career kick returns for the New York Jets and Seattle Seahawks, scoring 4 for both franchises. Away from football, Washington started his own charitable, nonprofit organization called the Leon Washington Foundation, whose mission is to assist low-income Jacksonville families with education, sports, and life skills. The organization hosts various events such as back-to-school giveaways, football clinics, and an annual flag football game. Post-retirement, Washington wanted to get into coaching. His passion stemmed from always wanting to help his teammates out and give back to the game in his Pop Warner days. So Washington took part of the Bill Walsh NFL Diversity Fellowship with the Jacksonville Jaguars in 2016 and the Atlanta Falcons in 2018. Washington is currently on the Detroit Lions coaching staff as part of the team's William Clayford Minority Coaching Assistantship Program, where he helps out with running backs, return specialists, and with weight training. Growing up, Washington saw his peers fall victim to gun violence and drug use. He is thankful for his family and close friends for keeping him on the straight and narrow. Washington was able to defy the odds and make it out of his circumstance, which led to him becoming a successful NFL player. Thank y'all for tuning in. I won't win. Check it out. Peace.